Hi there, I'm Betsy Evans, and I'm going to be reading chapters 17 and 18. Thursday passed in a blur of interviews and regular duties. Things settled down at Big Bend High School. Mandy came by the office to thank me for keeping my promise that Wayne Dooley wouldn't be able to hurt her again. She brought me a plate of chocolate chip cookies she made herself and presented them to me in the same serious, respectful way I would have been awarded a special commendation. I received them in the same manner. Her adoring look meant more to me than anything I could hang on the wall. It had been 4 days since the murder, and no guilty persons had come forward or floated to the top of our investigation. I had a close call in the afternoon when the sheriff instructed us, via Barney, to attend Norma's funeral the following day. She was being buried in the cemetery at the Terlingua ghost town, and there would be a short graveside service. He expected us to show respect for the deceased on his behalf, since he couldn't attend. He was the boss, so Barney agreed without consulting me. The sheriff pointed out that it wasn't unusual for a murderer to attend a victim's funeral. True, I told Barney, but that didn't mean I was going. I wouldn't go if it meant my job. I had a screeching fit about it. Kevin was buried in that cemetery, and I wasn't going to go there with a bunch of other people and have them watch me fall apart. Barney said calmly that the sheriff expected us to go, and he would pick me up if I fainted or anything. That was sweet, but I didn't want him there either. You don't have to visit Kevin's grave, Barney said, his mouth full of my chocolate chip cookies. Yes, but I know it's there. Just walk in and don't look around. Stand close beside me. We'll swagger in and out, the coolest deputies you ever saw in the West. I laughed at that, but my final words, I won't be there. My partner was surprised and impressed when I showed up at the funeral in full dress uniform. Barney was standing tall, the only way for him to stand. He looked serious and professional, ready for any criminals that dared show their faces. When he saw me, he grinned broadly. The ghost town cemetery has the same sweeping views as the porch. All big sky mountain ranges and wide desert panoramas. It was comforting, in a way, to the living, probably not to the dead. Some of the graves are marked only with piles of rocks and have hand-painted, hand-lettered wooden markers. A few are ornate. Most are simple tributes to departed loved ones. Most have bright plastic or paper flowers, candles, photos, or other small remembrances. There are simple graves from the mining days. Some are for children, even newborns. Reading the headstones is sad, not that I was going to. I walked past a humble grave with a handmade marker that reads, "Here in the arms of my beloved desert, I most assuredly rest in peace." It eloquently expresses my own feelings about the desert. There were a few others there besides Kevin that I had known in life, including a friend who fell to her death from a sheer cliff years ago, and an old, gentle cowboy lawman I admired as a small child. He let me hold his gun once, showing me the importance of the safety and speaking quietly about the seriousness of his profession. I didn't look around. Kevin would understand. Besides, he wasn't there in any real sense of the word. I had seen him briefly after the mortuary finished with him. The body of my blonde cowboy was there, but whatever made Kevin who he was had gone. Suddenly, a big rough hand was laid against the back of my neck. I looked into my father's handsome face. He smiled wistfully. Mija. Mija is a conjunction of two Spanish words, mi and hija, meaning my daughter. Papi, I said automatically. He hugged me tightly. I laid my head against his chest and wanted to stay like that. I didn't want to be at a funeral, and especially not there. I wanted him to lift me in his arms, the way he had when I was little, and he had taken me away from things that could hurt me. Tears sprang into my eyes. I couldn't have stopped them for anything. It's okay, mija, he whispered to me in Spanish. I'm here. That made me cry harder. He was there for me. He hadn't known Norma and wouldn't have liked her if he had. He was not a man to come to a funeral out of curiosity, and it was hard to believe he'd come under any circumstance. As far as I knew, the last time he'd been there was for Kevin's funeral, and he had held me up then, too. My father had been with Kevin the day he died. He and Kevin's best friend, Mitch, served as his crew that day, and were standing by when Kevin was trampled to death. It had been hard on them, unlike me, who only dreamed the nightmare my papi had seen firsthand. He had been the one who came to tell me, driving like a maniac from Amarillo. Somehow he kept himself together and had been strong for me when I couldn't be. He nudged me gently. Arriving in her look at me, I'm the queen way was Lily Munch, wearing an expensive-looking pantsuit and fashionable high-heeled boots. She looked hot and angry. Let her sweat, I thought unkindly, wiping my teary face. She and Norma made my mom's life miserable for a number of months, and they had done lasting harm to one of the few good organizations in our community. My opinion was that they deserved whatever bad things came to them. My professional opinion had to be different. Lil Munch is 50, with hair stiff-looking from repeated coloring. She is too tan. Her face looks leathery, though not very wrinkled. Her lips smile, but her eyes don't. She perpetually looks down on everyone, even though she's short. Lil was widowed about 2 years ago. Her husband had been accidentally killed on a construction job in the Texas Panhandle. No matter what, I knew that had been a horrible thing for Lil. He was a civil engineer and left her well off with a lot of assets and a large life insurance policy. In addition, Lil was suing the company for wrongful death. She would soon be a millionaire, if she wasn't already. I wasn't a millionaire or even close, but Kevin had left me life insurance money. That's how I know that money only makes the bills easier to pay. It doesn't fill the emptiness. After the short, poorly attended service, my father hugged me again and asked me to stop by his store later. Barney was talking to Lil, so I assumed he was making arrangements to interview her. I sat on a stone beach by the cemetery entrance and watched the people leaving. I couldn't identify any murderers among them. Lil had agreed to meet us at our office, so Barney and I went there to wait for her. What did you think about the funeral, Rico? It was okay, I guess. Hard. I feel proud of you for going. I didn't see anyone who seemed like the type to stab a woman in the heart, I said. I watched Gabe with his son, and I swear I don't think he's the one. Of course, I know you can't tell about people by looking at them. Yeah, I said. We're expecting someone with beady eyes and a snarly mouth and claws for fingernails, and I know it won't be like that. Damn, you got some kind of imagination in that head of yours. You should be glad you don't live in there, not that you'd fit. At that moment, Lil Munch herself came slamming through the door. Miss Munch, began Barney. I don't know where he was going with that because she interrupted him. I don't have time for this. I suggest you make time for it, I said, unable to hold it back. Barney gave me a look that said he thought I should keep my big mouth shut, but it was too late. When she sat in a chair next to me, my skin crawled. This won't take long, said my partner, trying to be civil and professional. I couldn't sit still. My feet were dying to kick her. I had disliked Lil Munch before she did anything to my mother. She treated people like they were her personal servants and never said please or thank you. Enough. I tried to make my face blank. I can't imagine what I can add to what I've already said. Her snootiness seemed to be for my benefit, since she was looking Barney over in a spider-like way. It was creepy, but I didn't think he noticed. Typical fly. Well, Miss Munch, we found that interviews in person are more productive. I'm going to record this conversation if you have no objection. Why would I object? She looked back and forth between us, her nose turned up. We were lowly peasants in her little kingdom. My partner was unperturbed and asked her to state her name and the other required information. After she did that, he said, I'd like for you to tell me again where you were on the day that Norma was murdered. She sighed. I was with my cousin Daphne Hendricks in Houston. I believe you've already spoken with her. Yes, I have. What did you do that day? Another you're destroying my life sigh. We had breakfast. Do you want to know what I ate? That won't be necessary. After breakfast, I read and wrote a few emails. We went shopping later and ate lunch at the mall. After that, we went home and talked and rested. My cousin's husband returned later from playing golf and made steaks on the grill. Was there any time when you weren't with your cousin or her husband? Only when I was in the bathroom or lying on the bed in my room. What is it that you really want to know? Why don't you just ask me? I accepted her challenge. Did you kill Norma Bates? She puffed up instantly, like one of those tiny sponges you drop in water, and poof, you have a little animal to play with in the tub. Of course I didn't kill her. That's ridiculous. Norma was my dear friend, and besides that, I was in Houston. I couldn't very well stab her from Houston, could I? Do you know how far it is from here to Houston? Yes, ma'am, we're aware of the distance involved, said my partner, jumping in to keep me from going for her throat. He gave me a bare sideways glance. I scooted my butt back in the chair and tried to behave. Suddenly the spider began putting heavy moves on the fly. She leaned towards Barney as if she was some sexy, irresistible babe about to offer herself to him. Deputy George, could we have a private talk without Deputy Rico? I really can't say what I need to say in front of her. Barney looked bitten. I want to remind you that our conversation is being recorded, so Deputy Rico will eventually hear what you say. You understand that, right? Yes, I understand. I'd just rather she weren't here while I speak. I rose and said nothing. I didn't care if she put her hands in his pants. He was a big old boy and could defend himself. As I was shutting my office door, I heard her say, "She scares me." So maybe Lil wasn't as clueless as I'd always assumed. She really had no reason to fear me. If I were ever going to hurt her or Norma, I would have done it when they were dragging my mother's reputation through the muck. I sat in a comfortable chair, rested my boots on the desk, and contemplated my hill. I was becoming convinced that Norma had been murdered by a stranger, some weird derelict passing through, and yet that seemed so unlikely. Oh, we had weird derelicts in Terlingua, but not murderous ones. Or not yet, anyway. Suddenly there was a handsome blonde man at my window. Kevin! I jumped up and tried to figure out how to raise the glass. There didn't seem to be a way. He put his hands against the window, and I laid mine against his. He was wearing his dress-up clothes, including the Stetson he'd been buried in. I sat down hard and cried until there were no more tears left in me. I plopped myself down in front of Barney. What did she have to say? He stared at my red, puffy face. Lil says she's afraid of you. She wanted to tell me that you seem more likely as a suspect than your mother, you being younger and stronger and more hot-headed and opinionated. What did you say? I told her you had an alibi. She asked if you had a real alibi or if I was just covering for you. I assured her that I'm a man of the highest integrity. What did she say to that? She rolled those old fish eyes at me. I don't think I changed her mind any about your possible guilt, but then she suggested Miriam or Maud. They hated Norma too, she was quick to point out. She ranted about them, but ended up back at Stephanie's doorstop. She said your mom threatened Norma to her face and in the community. I threatened her to her face too, but I didn't kill her. I don't think I could drive a knife into someone, Barney. Well, I wasn't accusing you. I know, I'm just saying. So Norma's dead, but nobody killed her. That would be about right. I think a stranger killed her. I know you said it's unlikely, but it could happen. Yeah, it could. Barney regarded me silently. What I'm saying is that some sicko could have happened upon the house, or Norma could have met somebody somewhere and told him where she lived, or someone could have followed her home. There's an endless variation of scenarios. He nodded slightly. Most likely it was someone from her past. Yeah, there's that too. We have to stay open to all the possibilities. Right. There sure are a lot of them. What about the Texas Ranger? Did he add anything to our evidence? Barney frowned. I don't think so. If he did, our sheriff hasn't said anything. I'd like to think we were capable of investigating a murder without any help from the Texas Rangers. At that point, my father walked in. He seemed anxious and didn't hug me with his usual enthusiasm. "What's up?" I asked, and invited him to sit after he'd shaken hands with Barney. My father was a real heartstopper when he was younger. Even as his daughter, and even now that he's old, I know a good-looking man when I see one. Mom says the first time she saw him, she thought he was a Marlboro Man. There was a cigarette commercial being filmed on a nearby clifftop, and the men were in and out of the bar where she was having a drink. When she asked my dad, she found out he didn't even speak English. He wasn't a model, but she fell in love with him anyway. My father's skin is bronzed where the sun hits it, and his eyes are nearly black like his hair. I got his thick hair and dark eyes, but my skin is lighter than his. My mother's genes at work. I'm worried about your mother. He passed a worn cowboy hat from hand to hand as he spoke. There's a lot of talk in the community about her murdering Norma. That doesn't make her guilty, Poppy. I didn't have to translate to Barney because he was raised in a Spanish-speaking neighborhood in South Texas. He spoke perfect Spanish and was paying close attention. That's not what worries me, mija. I know she's not guilty. It's upsetting to her to be accused of this after all she went through before. We're trying to find the murderer as fast as we can, I said, although we were getting nowhere with that. I glanced at Barney, who was watching me. I'm not faulting you and Barney. I know you're working hard. I'm just worried about your mother, and I can't even say for sure that I saw her on Saturday evening. She needs an alibi, and I feel like I'm letting her down. I can't lie about it, though. No, it wouldn't be right to lie. Mom doesn't want you to lie either. Will you spend some time with her? He asked. Sure, but maybe you would be more of a comfort. My dad colored deeply, but said nothing. You comforted her for 20 years, puppy. Just because you're divorced doesn't mean you can't go see her and offer support. I know that. Barney said, Listen, senor, we're going to find the killer. We don't even have the lab results yet. That might tell us things we don't know now. I'll try to be patient, he said with a wry smile. After my father left, Barney said, I think he still loves your mother. I know it, and she still loves him. They're the two hardest-headed people you'll ever know. So you come by it naturally. I gave him a scathing look, but my looks are always wasted on him.